Yeah. I just want to please, if you need to, think I'm doing wrong or walking through, this is my first time sharing a committee, so I'll be stumbling a lot along the way. Just feel free to let me know. I don't really, feedback is always welcome. Yeah, so thanks for all being here. Yes, this is, we haven't had a student success committee in a few years. I was, talking with a few of the educational leaders and stuff, and board members. And part of the goal, as I envision it, well, also this first meeting is also I want to hear from all of you about what you think, what kind of goals you want to also achieve. So what I'm going to say here is kind of preliminary and just kind of just the kind of preliminary vision of what we're doing. I guess ultimately, part of the role of the role of the committee is to, and probably not very often because this is probably like the culminating work, is to oversee policy if there's any new policy that we can recommend to the board. In terms of like if there's things that need to be changed or removed even or added to help your work. Because one of the things is that I see us as a team. You all are the educational leaders, the experts in this, and so part of us is to help work with and figure out what we can do to help achieve our goals, which I think we're all pretty in alignment. So that's kind of like the big overarching picture of what I see this committee doing. The next part is also part of it is also just to monitor the progress, right? Where I see oversight, monitor to make sure that we are meeting our metrics, how we can figure out if we're meeting our metrics, and also if what we're doing is being effective or not. Now I know that things like this are maybe multi-year things, so we may not be able to figure everything out, and that's totally fine. But I think the big picture of this idea, the oversight and monitoring, is that if there's work to be done in the future because of things that we've uncovered this year, we can start getting ready for that and set us up for success next school year, for example. One thing is, for example, and hopefully we don't have to ever come to this, but like one thing, for example, is like if we having issues with boundaries, right? Or school populations that need to be revisited, something like that. Maybe we need to set up. Again, this is not something I'm just throwing something like random out there. This is not what I see. Hopefully, is not an issue. Um, and yeah, and so that's kind of where we're at. And then I also want to hear from hopefully all of you to see if there's anything you want to add. So I guess this kind of start from our pre-meeting session. We came up with some ideas, and let me know what you know things that you want or think you want to add or even remove. So a couple ideas that we had are sorry, I'm looking at the wrong. Yeah, a couple ideas we had were the stuff that was on this year. So over monitoring the middle school redesign, the progress and curriculum adaptation. One big thing that we might want to visit also graduation requirements for high school. That's not necessarily something that we. I mean, it could be, but it's something I just want to talk and have an ongoing conversation. Um, and then also monitoring it and kind of overseeing the science of reading. Sorry, it's still early for me. I tend to be a night person, so anything before noon, lunchtime, I'm usually bumbling my way through. And yeah, am I forgetting everything? Oh yeah, things that I personally would like to also make sure that we kind of oversee is just kind of the course offering equity with all our middle schools, especially in lieu of all the boundary changes. Um, uh, yeah, and then also just the implementation of the work that you're doing and how we can kind of help or monitor or help suggest just oversee, right? So kind of open it up to kind of other topics that other people would like to talk upon. We got a lot of ideas here, hopefully to get us started thinking.
I'm not sure if this is the place to talk about how we're gonna spend the money we have for living. My personal, and if we can even spend what we're going to get later now, for making sure we get enough, or as many caring adults in the classroom as we can when school starts. I'm not sure if this is the menu for that or not, but that's something that's really important.
So is that going to come up on the budget amendment conversation? I think as the budget committee as a whole.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
So there's there's multiple spaces to have different conversations. And there'll be times when, you know, if it's coming to the full board, we'll make a full presentation and have the board discussion there to represent so that the entire board can.
But that's being put into lots of different areas. Okay.
Anything else that you?
Dr. Green?
Thank you. One of the things that I'd like to see us looking into as part of this, the Student Success Committee, as we start thinking about what is going to help all of our students be successful, would be to have we considered like ROTC and JROTC programs and the curriculum that they offered. I've spoken with a few different people as well as some students to see where the interest came as a result of some of the students at Roosevelt High School. And I didn't know enough about it, so I started looking into it. I've checked with Oregon City. I've spoken with the mayor of Vancouver, about their stuff. And I'm just looking around to see how this can help our graduation rate and get more kids access to things that are going to help them to be successful, understanding that it's probably not best for everybody, but for the ones that it is good for, I want to make sure that we give them an offering if we can.
Thank you. I like that. I feel like that there was one topic that came up in our pre-meeting was also overseeing multiple pathways to graduation.
Correct.
Right. So that could be a huge part of that as well. That kind of discussion. I like that. Some other ideas that kind of piggybacking off what Director Green mentioned. Also, not only just looking at graduation requirements, but also, like we're talking about multiple pathways to grad, like CT programs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or highlight, the portrait of a graduate. What do we mean by that, and how is it implemented? I should say. Also, things I would also like to learn more about is like our Indian Ed program, right? And just kind of see how best we can support these programs, right? Especially looking at populations that have historically been less successful than we would like, right? Great. And I'll use in.
You're sending out the notes to us all, right? Or are you not?
Yes,
You are.
they
Okay.
well, Kara takes our notes for us.
Okay. Great, this is great. Again, the purpose of the first meeting is more just kind of discovery, and we have two things that are set that I would like to start learning more about is our middle years learning, and also our touch a little bit on graduation requirements, which I think are being presented today, right? Great. So I feel like anyone has any more?
Just out of curiosity, do you know everybody here? Do we need to do a quick round of?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Thank you. We should do that, right? Just
Margaret, you want to start?
Sure. No, I just was going to say that your name tag say presenter, but that's not your name. So, to go through that process. So, I'm Margaret Calvert. I'm one of the assistant superintendents and work with secondary schools primarily, and multiple pathways to graduation.
Exam help board manager.
Cheryl Proctor, Deputy Superintendent, Instruction and School Committees.
Patty Sullivan, new board member.
Esther McBain, Assistant Superintendent of Elementary, and we worked together on SEGC.
That's right.
I know you real well.
Thank you. Oh, I'm not easy to, okay, anyways, easy to figure out, huh?
Right.
Eddie Wong, board member, I guess, chair of this committee.
Richard Smith, Director of Middle Grades Redesign.
Good morning. I'm Joanna Tobin, Senior Director of Middle Grades, Core Academics, and Redesign.
Felix Christie, Senior Director of High School Core Academics.
John Franco, Chief of Schools. Jay Viano, Chief of Student Support Services.
Herman Green, board member.
Right.
Bradshaw, Executive Assistant.
And then there's Mr. Proctor.
Terry Proctor, Communications Department.
Great. Right. So what I have so far, just kind of jumping back into it, is sorry, let me organize my thoughts. We were ultimately if it comes up, explore new policy or removal or change of to help, your work. Monitoring
Would that
progress.
be making recommendations to the policy committee?
Yes,
'Cause that's a
we
separate
would probably
committee.
would have to go
So
through
we
that.
would, yeah. We would examine policy and then make recommendations.
Yes. Which I am also part of that committee as well, so hopefully
That would be
that helps it be a little bit more efficient. Next is just monitoring progress of our programming. We're talking about middle school science reading and high school graduation. Just kind of overseeing population trends, making sure we just keep a close eye on that. Middle school redesign, and we're looking at multiple pathways to graduation, including the great things that Director Green also mentioned as well. Yeah, I think that's pretty much what I got, right? All right, that seems like a huge workload for the year. Thanks to you all for being here. If there's nothing else, I guess we can move on to the next agenda item, which is the which I don't have in front of me. The middle school design.
Great.
Yeah.
Right. Well, good morning. Again, I'm Joanna Tobin, Senior Director of Middle Grades, Core Academics, and Redesign. And thank you so much for the invitation to speak on these topics and to share our work with you and our next steps. An overview here, we'd like to share the wonderful work from Dr. Armstrong's team, which is a guidebook, and a lot of this work sits within that guidebook. So we'll share that with you today. We'd like to give you the brochure, huge labor of love here, our middle grades redesign brochure, give an overview of core academics and implementation, and then I'll pass to Philippe we will speak on those high school graduation requirements and give a high level overview there. Centering our board goals for 8th grade readiness and high school graduation is really the work of this team and what we're aiming to do. I'll just share very briefly. Of course, this is not a presentation on data. However, our trends really are trending in the right direction. And so I'll touch on that as we go through the core areas and what we're seeing there a bit more. Let's start though with this guidebook. I'll pass this around, and as mentioned, the topics that we're touching on today are included in this guidebook. Again, on Dr. Armstrong's behalf, this is really a compilation of multiple departments and really aiming to have one central location for board members, community, educators, families to be able to see a high-level overview of all of what we are working on and providing for our students in PPS. So the Future Now, a collective, a teaching and learning collective. For those who are online, there's a URL code, or there's a code there, and also a link. And hard copies are available at the district office. So centering our middle grades. When we talk about middle grades, when we talk about middle grades core academics and redesign, we really are talking about both our comprehensive middle schools and our K-8 schools. So of course our K-8s include 6th through 8th grade students, and so oftentimes we get that question of does middle school redesign include just comprehensives or K-8? And so we just want to make that really clear. This is from page 8 of the middle grades brochure. So just really highlighting all of the schools that we serve within redesign and within core academics. So with that, next we will pass out this just tremendous body of work with PBS staff and community, and leaning on the research in middle grades, nationwide research. Definitely a labor of love. The last page highlights many of the staff that were involved in this process, and of course many more. And so I just want to say in gratitude to everyone who has worked on this. Before I pass it over to Director of Middle Grades Redesign, Richard Smith, just wanted to say thank you to all who are involved, our community and our staff, and many schools who were represented in the construction of this. Over to you.
Thank you.
Yes.
So this is our middle grades redesign plan. It's been a work in progress over the last couple of years. And there's been a lot of different committees that have gotten together with a lot of feedback from parents, from students, from principals about what should go in here, as well as research. So we have a middle grades website that has the brochure linked. That's what's presented up there. And I'll just briefly kind of go through what this packet has. On the first page, it has our foundations, our mission, our vision, and the guiding values as we went through this. And then on page 2, on the introductions, just kind of a brief overview of some of the processes that happened to get to the point where we are today and why we engaged in this work. Page 3 goes through the timeline of what's happened with middle grades redesign over the last few years and how we got to where we are today in August of 2023. And it was definitely a work in progress to get there. Though I'm new in the role, I was also involved in this process, so I was able to follow it along as we went through it. And then the themes are important on page 4 because these themes is where our buckets of work lie for what we're trying to do with our middle grades redesign. And so you can see what's in bold right there is what's going to be talked about quite a bit in the initiatives coming up. And those are inclusive and differentiated teaching and learning, embracing change, racial equity and social justice, professional excellence and support, and integrated adolescent supports. And so as we go to page 5, I just want to highlight real quickly there how we got to these items. It was on current research, which is referenced at the back of the packet, best practices from other institutions, so we saw what was happening elsewhere, and then guidance from our Association for Middle Level Education, which is a group that we partner with, survey feedback, and then expertise from the different offices here at Central Office. And so on page 6, 7, and 8, that is where you can see those 5 items and what initiatives fall under each of those. I won't go through every single one of them right now because there's 18 of them and it sounds quite a bit, but these are very closely tied together, these 18 initiatives, and you can't really do one without the other. And many of these are ongoing in our school currently, and I want to hone in specifically. So for example, what's already happening in schools right now is like Initiative 4, provide comprehensive social, emotional, and mental health services. You know, we've increased our counselor to student. We've lowered that threshold at our schools. We have different supports in the schools for that and different partnerships, including upcoming with the Balmer. So those are things that are ongoing. When you look at Initiative 5, implement engaging grade level and standards aligned curriculum, that's also happening in our school with the curriculum adoption. So skipping over to page 9 and 10 really hones into how the plan unfolds into our schools. And so I'm going to scroll down to that. So on page 10, the plan for years 2023 through 2026, there's 8 ongoing that are currently ongoing at the top. And then the simultaneous initiatives is what I wanted to spend just a couple minutes on today. And then the year to year is what's going to happen down the line a little bit. So the 5 key plans for this school year, the simultaneous initiatives that all K-8s and 6-8s are going to be working on, is providing all middle grade students with access to advisory programs. So schools last year got to adopt a specific curriculum and built an advisory to their schedule. So all schools this year will be doing advisory, and we'll be monitoring what that looks like and how that works with students feeling an increased sense of belonging in their schools. We also had our schools craft innovative schedules with more opportunities for enrichment, with more opportunities for access to grade level curriculum, and more access to different electives and access to advisory. And so those schedules reflect that for this upcoming year. One that we're working on in process is standardizing our 8th grade field trips and capstones. We know that those experiences widely vary across our district. And so we're partnering with principals and finding out how to standardize those in a culminating capstone. And we have some great ideas around how that looks like from 6th to 8th grade. When we think about 6th grade outdoor school, that's a really cool opportunity all of our students currently engage in. And then we're exploring how to provide additional opportunities in 7th and 8th grade that students would then carry forth until the end of their 8th grade year for a capstone and presentation. And then fully implementing a restorative justice framework. This year, all K-8s and 6-8s have been provided with a restorative justice coordinator. And so thank you for providing that funding for our schools. And so we're partnering with the schools to get that framework up and running to lower disparity in discipline, to help students feel a better sense of belonging and ownership in their schools. And then finally, implementing interdisciplinary 8th grade success teams. This is going to be where we help that transition from 8th to 9th grade with all of our students to be able to build that bridge. We have pretty good bridges from 5th to 6th, but 8th to 9th, we're seeing that we're losing some kiddos there, so we want to build that bridge deeper in. So those are the 5 core simultaneous initiatives that this year we'll be working through with principals and their staff. And then finally, this is just kind of an overview of how that's currently happening. You know, we have some more campus safety associates, we have the restorative justice professional learning, and then the core counseling curriculum, which is with the advisory programs going on in the school. And so this year, we're also going to be partnering with principals on the last 5 initiatives to see how we roll that out over the 3 years, and those will be campus-specific plans over the next 3 years. That's a bit about middle grades redesign.
Advisory programs, Lynn.
Yes, this one right here.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So just to add a little bit more to the advisory programs, this is a partnership with the T-Cell department. They have been working on the adoption for a few years now. And so we really gave, as Richard said, we gave school leaders that opportunity to engage with the community around selection of 1 or 2, 2 different options, Wayfinder, and we do it for the culture. And so this is also really touching on, as Richard said, all of these initiatives are really interdependent and rely upon one another. And so we do have on our website, we have links for our teachers. This Thursday, all of our middle school teachers will be trained in the curriculum that their school selected. And so that was really a big undertaking. Making these shifts in our large, wonderful district takes a lot of intentionality and time with our teachers so that they have that preparation heading into that opportunity to implement and launch these advisory programs. And so I want to also elevate that as a real cross-departmental work and elevate Jill Bryant and that T-Cell department for their work. It was a wonderful way for us to hold hands on this implementation for our students.
Joanna, can you say what T-cell means?
Oh yes, transformative social emotional learning. Thank you, Ms. Calvert. Yes, so that is happening, and that's really exciting to elevate. And we look forward to, as you opened with, the asks or what to move forward and these schedule pieces. We have some really great pieces in place. We were able to look last year what was needed to make space for advisory within our schedules. That happened. We have some next steps that we also want to implement to make more room for all of these 18 initiatives. And so as these are our simultaneous initiatives that we're really elevating this year, again, there's a lot of interplay with all of them, as Richard shared.
So I have a question. So you said you're making time for them in the schedules.
Yes.
So when you're making time, what are you having to cut out?
Yes.
I know
yes.
it's always hard.
So currently, many of our schools are on what's called a 5 of 7 period. So they have, students have access to 7 different classes. Some of our schools throughout the district still are on a 6-period day. So there are differences, and in here on page, we can put you to page 12, that gives a little bit more of an overview of that. So our scheduling work this year really looked at how do we maximize within our current contractual, within our current constraints, which really, we are really in this construct of some schools having the opportunity for a 5 of 7 and some being on a 6-period. When we say 5 of 7, teachers teach 5 of the 7 periods.
But students have access to 7 full
Thank you.
periods, 2 additional periods, or
Yes. And so with that 6 period, teachers teach 5 of 6 periods. And so what we're really striving to do is to provide more opportunities for our students, ultimately everyone having access to that 7 period day. We also have a hybrid. 2 of our schools have the hybrid in place already. So that being George Middle School and Ockley Green have some variation of a hybrid schedule, which what that means is the periods aren't identical on every single day. And so they have a longer period within the week for their advisory. That's been in place for some time and has been working well for them. Some of our schools did already have advisory programs in place prior to this year, but they weren't standardized with that social emotional learning that the district's providing.
And it was usually like once a week? Would
Some,
there be
yes,
advisory time?
yes, oftentimes, yes. And so we've really moved to a more consistent 3 times a week. And schools are approaching that a little bit differently, which we gave room for this year as we launch, and we'll look at that data, gives us an opportunity to see what's really working well.
So with the 5 of 7, we're able to add time into a student's schedule, so that we don't have to take anything
something
away.
It might have been a study hall. They could do.
Well, it was intentional to build a 5 of 7 so that we could add more electives. What we found initially was that there was limitation in with the 6 period schedule of what electives and how many elective students could opt into. But then with the middle school redesign, looking at how we could build other intentional programming like advisory and the TSEP.
So if you have
And it
7 instead of 6, you've got shorter periods.
You actually have longer periods on a 6 period, but fewer opportunities. And this will become increasingly important for us to navigate and get your help funding wise as we really elevate PE requirements. Because one of the pieces, so again, the interplay. So we talk about PE for a moment. Our PE requirements are increasing and our schedules need to support that access for students. On the 6 period, it is very, very challenging to make that happen.
Reese, just kind of clarify really quick. Is the move trying to push towards all schools to be 5 of 7, or is it their
Yes.
choice? All right,
That would be the hope, yes.
the hope.
I think currently there are 10 of the 15
10 of
are 7 period.
Okay, and what are the barriers for the rest of the 5 that are still in 6?
It does require an increase of staffing.
Okay.
And that is, we know those numbers, and we are hoping to realize that for all schools.
Okay.
And we have been able to, over time, increase the 5 of 7 just in the past 2 years.
Yes.
I'm not sure, I don't recall where it was prior to the 2 years, but we're making incremental progress because now we're at 10 or 15 schools where before, Margaret, you had.
Yeah, so I think, over time, this is, so I appreciate the timeline on the front of this, of the book here, because part of, as many of you know, we've gone from transitioning from primarily a K-8 model back to a middle grades model, and as you're describing, Director Wang, it was around, what are the course offerings, right? So like, how do we have robust course offerings? What does that look like? How large, what's the student population you need to have with that? And then actually, how do you provide interventions and support within the day, as well as a robust programming? What does that look like in 6 periods versus 7? Sort of, where is that flexibility? And I know that some of the, as we went through this transition and coming back to opening middle schools, like Tubman was reopened and Roseway Heights was converted, as we've gone through Harrison Park this year. So as we've gone through transitioning out of K-8s back to middle schools, we've looked at what are the needs of the schools, and little by little, incrementally, as Dr. Proctor has stated, we've moved through how many schools are on a 7-period day. And I'm trying to think, last year there were 3 additions. This year there's a 4th. So bringing us to 10. So in the last 2 years, we've been able to add 4 schools into that 7-period day. And the hope is to continue to do that as we move forward, to have some consistency as you're mentioning about academic programming.
And we do also keep an eye, just for the sake of equity, when we talk about middle school, we're looking at, yes, the standalone middle schools, but we also, if you listen in the language, we talk heavily about middle years. Because we want to ensure that even in the K-8, that we are intentional about the middle years experience for the students. So it encompasses all of our students in grades 6 to 8. We get the same opportunities, and that's what we're striving to.
I was wondering, is it more the K-8 where it's harder to get the 7 periods?
K-8 is a little bit more
That's a harder
challenging
one.
because yes, you have fewer students in K-8. And because you have fewer kids in K-8, it is harder to provide a more robust curriculum
And then you've got
and
the
experience.
younger kids having the.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
that's hard.
So it's part of the work that SEGC tackles. In order to get students to Kellogg, we had to take some K-8s and make them K-5 year.
And I don't want to, I definitely don't want to also underscore the importance of like all middle schools in particular having an advisory and being consistent with it. When you're talking about three times their opportunities to be an advisory. And if you don't know what advisory is, opportunities where they can have conversations that they need to have that they maybe won't have in a language arts math class, right? Where you can talk about definitely pertinent things that are happening outside of school and how it actually affects them in their daily lives, and actually setting aside time to do that is extremely important. And we've all known and we've seen it across the country, some of the coming back from pandemic, especially at the middle grades, how much of a struggle it's been. And so we're this opportunity at the middle levels is very, very important.
I got 2 questions. One is when you mentioned the 10 to 15 that are at 5 to 7, those are just the middle schools, right? Correct. And then, I guess the question with advisories, I have been in a few advisories, some that have been done well and some that haven't. So I'm just curious about what supports do we have in place in terms of like supporting how the transition to advisory, because I know that a lot of teachers when you just throw advisory like, oh, they don't know what to do. So what kind of supports do we have for our teachers?
I think the biggest piece to elevate right now is the shared learning experience. So carving out that half-day time coming up this Thursday, and then we have some ongoing professional development throughout the year. We're in a learning pit with this. It's going to be a shift. Yeah. Approximately 66% of our schools had some form of advisory, and yet did not have a standardized curriculum in their hands. And so, trade-offs, I think that, that access to this curriculum that has very strategic professional development with it will be a big support for our teachers. And I also don't want to be naive to the fact that it is a big shift, right? Yeah. So we will be in that learning and growing pit, as we know, and listening to what our schools need. Some schools are leaning into it with a little bit of a softer start the first week or so and just growing into that, pacing off of their staff needs. Our principals are very in tune to what their teachers are needing right now.
Mm-hmm.
We also provided, go ahead, Richard.
I was gonna say we've added in a person at each school lead that'll get 8 hours of extended time to be able to help lead that work at each of the schools.
Very cool.
Very smart.
Yeah. Do we have any feedback in terms of from students, from teachers, from the principals about how advisory is going in these implementations?
I'll start and then you can, or you want
Yeah,
I guess
I mean,
in general 507 as well, but I'm just curious.
having spoken with the K-8 and middle grades principals, they expressed that they're excited to get up and running. They want to see how it goes. They've invited us in to come walk with them and to evaluate how it's going, but they're excited about the curriculum. They think that it's they had a chance last year to review it and adopt it. And so overall, the general tone from building leaders is that they're really, they're always a little bit nervous, of course, to roll something new out, but they're also really excited to have a standardized curriculum of one of these 2 across their schools.
I think that, so there were a number of schools that have piloted, there are 2 different sort of entry points, I would say. Some schools developed their own sort of curriculum and kind of went through that process. Like Hosford is an example of a school that really had developed it over a number of years. And then there are other schools that went through the pilot process. So Beaumont's another example of a school that went through a pilot process. And thinking about when we talk about some really critical things around identity, community, connection, people, those are things that have surfaced from schools about and how students interact with each other and with peers and also sort of what are those communal community agreements has been probably the things that I've heard most about what people see as positive. I think in concert with some of the work that we're doing around restorative practices, like this is a space also where students can practice, and there will be entry points for people to go in and do some school-wide lessons to sort of set the tenor as well.
I was curious, in the advisory groups, will it be a mix of ages, like 6, 7, 8 together?
Yeah, actually, in our design for this year, it is embedded within a class period. So looking at how we can pull this off does need to be connected to a class period for the teacher taking attendance. Some classes may end up with a co-teaching situation. The majority will be one teacher within a class period. So maybe many of our schools are doing a first period. Also, some are doing a midday opposite of lunch. So either that third period, fourth period.
But as far as the grades, would
Single
be
grade.
all 8th graders together?
Correct,
Not
unless
mixed.
it's a course that happens to have a few off level.
Okay. I've seen it happen with different age groups.
Yes.
Which is kind of nice.
It can be, and these are the
Yeah.
things we've really grappled with within the redesign. Absolutely, there were some lively conversations around that.
It's kind of like a homeroom model almost.
There's some. For many of our K-8s, that's how they're building. Sorry, you want to speak to that?
Oh yeah, I mean, many of the K-8s are really small too when you really think about it, and so some are even only have like one section per grade level, so those kids travel together as they move up. At most, you typically see 2 sections per grade level, and so it gives them a chance to build community with that group, and also we understand the limitations as well with sizes.
Sorry, one more question. You mentioned about increasing PE, hopefully with the 5-7. Where's our efforts on that right now?
We
curious.
made a proposal
Oh,
for
sorry.
the. Oh yes,
Well,
go ahead.
finish.
Go ahead, Director Green. And then I'll go ahead.
My question actually goes back to what we were just talking about prior to, as far as like we say we have 10 or 15. I'm looking to find out what is the budgetary impact to get all schools there, to all 15 schools, because I'm sure the reason that we're at 10 or 15 has something to do with money. And so if we said we wanted to do it in all 15 schools, have we investigated what that budgetary impact would look like, to find out even if it's feasible or what sacrifices would need to be made, or is it best to just leave it how it sits? But what's the number?
The team has investigated over the course of years. I'm going to turn it over to Margaret Calvert, who may not be able to pull a number out of her wonderful brain, but will give us what we've seen as trend, as need.
Yeah, so I think there is an additional FTE requirement, Director Green, and I think that is,
5 FTE.
what's that?
It would be 5 FTE.
It is, I think that I would like to come back with a more definitive number, but the biggest thing is that there's an actual staffing implication. And I think we have some analysis that we've done, and I'm happy to bring back the details of how to get to the all 15 to that level. Happy to do that.
So it would look like a range of FTE, maybe somewhere between 5 and 10, 5 and 10 possibly. And then the average cost of one FTE is it 150?
Like 120, I think.
150,
I was gonna say
20,000.
120,
120 approximately.
at least 120.
And so giving you those rough numbers is just to let you know that we have thought about it. We do have an idea of what it would be, and if we're gonna present something, we want to take a little time to crunch the numbers better, so we can give you a definitive dollar amount.
Okay, I would love that. And then my thought, just to follow up with that, based on the numbers you just said, would this be additional FTE, meaning that staff that we don't already have, or would this be giving somebody else a new job or something like that?
It would be additional FTE, staff we don't have.
Okay,
Yes.
that's what I was looking for. Right, that's what I'm looking for. We need new bodies.
Yes. So, and then to piggyback on the PE question, we did make a proposal we initiated some of our early budget conversations of how we were gonna spend down the additional dollars that we received from state funding, and we did make a proposal to the board. Part of the
Okay.
proposal was to add FTE for PE so that we could increase and be better in compliance with PE. And with that, that breakdown is going to be coming forward for the board's full consideration.
Okay.
I do want to add that the two go hand in hand, right? So while we made a proposal for PE, it didn't address the 5 of 7, but by addressing the 5 of 7, we could potentially address both that and the PE. And I don't know if anyone wants to elaborate on what I'm trying to put out there.
Yeah, sure. I think just to add to that, our goal, so it is really happening. PE requirements are increasing for 6-8. ODE, we've had a really long runway and it multiplied a couple of times. I remember clear back in 2026 as a middle school principal, this was happening, and now it's here. So we really are making headway to arrive at 3/4 of PE for all of our middle grades by the 2025-26 school year. And ODE has made it very clear that we have to make that happen. There are no more progress updates around that. And so with that, as Dr. Proctor was saying, this goes hand in hand with our schedule work and our shifts and our increase around FTE.
And then with that, with that proposal that's coming forward for the PE component, there is some additional FTE.
Great.
So at this point, right now, not all middle schools have PE programs?
Yeah, they do.
They have PE programs. They do not meet the full demand of the latest requirements around PE, the requirements set forth by ODE.
Which is 150 minutes per week average for the school year. Each, yeah.
Okay.
150 average per week for the year. So in the way it's designed now, as we were making progress towards it, we chunked it quarter at a time. So many schools are offering one full quarter of PE. We are proposing that schools increase to 3/4 of PE. And with the budgetary ask that will be coming forward to the board, that would bring us to better alignment. And so more information will come with the percentages of what percentage of schools would then be in compliance.
To clarify really quick, what do you mean by 3/4?
Quarters meaning the 9-week period.
Oh, okay, that
Yeah.
quarters, okay.
I call it the 9-week period. I
Not
haven't heard it.
3/4, but 3/4.
Yeah, 3/4. Yeah, that's where I was getting from.
3/4 of the school year. So the first
Yeah.
quarter and the second quarter equal the first semester. Third quarter and fourth quarter equal the second semester.
So you'd have 1/4.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
We want to pick up where we left off for
Yes.
the interest of time. to
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
plow through.
Shall I just fly through
Yeah,
these
let's
core
go
academic slides here real quick? So grounding in our vision and our purpose around middle grades core academics, again, of course, serving students in our comprehensive middle schools and our K-8s. So to talk about math, we are now heading into our second year of our adoption, which is mid-school math. This rated very high on Ed Reports. It really is hands-on engaging, real-world math for 6th through 8th. And also we've embarked upon deep learning and reflection within our K-12 math system for how we meet middle grades learners situated within there. Our trend data right now, again, we're seeing some really positive results from our math and wanting to stay the course. Also noting that we do have a conversation around our accelerated or some other opportunities within our system currently, really looking at how we ensure that our students have great access to our grade level standards aligned math, and that we still maintain pathways to more rigorous math courses as well. So there'll be more to come on that in the future. Over to science, we're now in our third year of implementation of the Science Education for Public Education Program, or CPUP as we refer to it. Again, this is also really hands-on. When you walk into many of our science classes, you'll see students getting in there and doing experiments and really making meaning in partners or in small groups. It was really designed in alignment with the three-dimensional areas for those next generation science standards. That's really the foundation for our science currently.
And this PowerPoint is in board book if you want to follow along. Yep, go ahead.
I'm really excited to share about our developments for social science for middle grades. This past year, K-12 worked really hard on the adoption process. And it's challenging. The standards currently, we're in an off cycle. So the ODE will be presenting new standards by 2026. And so the texts out there currently just did not beautifully align, but we found a really great pathway forward. Our AIR committee for 6-8 had been working really, it just was a great representation of our PPS teachers. We had an edition of TCI, History Alive. Our AIR committee landed on a recommendation for TCI, and we were able to find a way to do a bridge until we reach those new standards, to have our teachers access the latest editions for TCI, History Alive, for the teacher editions, the student editions. And we also really are excited about this new curriculum, Black History 365. That curriculum we are calling not a supplemental, we're calling it a complementary program, because it really goes really hand in hand with our 7th and 8th grade standards. The standards within Black History 365 do not touch as much on 6th grade, and so we did not order the text for 6th grade, we did for 7th and 8th. And so that's being rolled out currently and was a part of the teacher professional development in June and August. English Language Arts, this is our 2nd year of an adoption. We partner with 912 as well on this. We both grade bands adopted Intro to Literature by Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, so we call it HMH as it's referred to. And so this is a really robust curriculum. We find that there are just many elements to it, and so as we live into the 2nd year of the adoption, teachers are really getting in there and utilizing those pieces even more so. And with that, I can pause if there are any core academic questions before passing it to Philippe.
Just really quick, you mean, so adoption, it's no longer piloting, right? It's actually, teachers are doing this.
Correct, yes, implementing. So this is our 2nd year of implementation with the English Language Arts curriculum. And we still brought out our vendors. The 2nd year still, again, using that implementation, that learning pit analogy, we still are really learning in that 2nd year. And so we brought out our vendors both in June and this month, and again for the new teacher session on Thursday. And so we're really lucky to have that resource within the bond funds, supporting our deeply engaging curriculum, also being that teacher development, teacher professional development piece.
Mm-hmm. Great. Do you have any questions?
Questions before we go on to high school graduation requirements?
Director Green, are you good over there?
Yeah, I'm good over here. Thanks.
Okay, just want to check in.
Okay.
Great.
Well, it's exciting to hear about all the good work happening in middle schools as they prepare students for high school. And of course, our mission is to make sure that our high schoolers are ready for college and career. So I'll talk briefly about some graduation requirements. We'll look at our most recent graduation data. We can take a quick look at the high school success plan. Feel free to stop me, and Margaret will be able to answer and jump in as needed. So our high school graduation requirements, I'll do a quick overview and then talk about some details. So in order to graduate from PPS High School, students need 4 years of English, 3 years of social studies, 3 years of math, 3 years of science, 2 years of world language, 1 year of fine or performing art or technical art, 1 year of health, 1 year of PE, and then 6 electives. So for a total of 24 credits. Students earn half a credit per semester, so they earn a full credit over the course of a school year. Our students take 8 classes typically, so over the course of 4 years, they can earn up to 32 credits. One thing.
Go ahead, sorry.
One thing to note is that our graduation requirements are considerably more rigorous than what the state requires. So for example, in social studies, we're very specific to say that students need to take 1 year of US history, 1 year of modern world history, 1 year of government and econ. The state says that students just need 3 social studies credits, half a credit, which needs to be civic education. When it comes to math, we require students to take at least Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry. The state simply says that students need 3 years of math above Algebra 1. With regards to science, we're specific to say all students have to take physics, chemistry, and biology, as opposed to the state requirement which says that students just need 1 year of lab science. The state does not require world language. We do 2 years. And I think that's it as far as the differences.
And the 2 years of world language coincide with the OUS system. In order to get into the OUS system, you need the 2 years.
So
Coincide with what?
The Oregon University system, so
Oh, the
UNIVO, Oregon State, Eastern Oregon, and so they require a minimum 2 years. So it makes sense, right? That
Yeah.
So if we look at the next slide, when we look at how our graduation rates compare to the state, it's exciting to see that we're performing considerably better than the state, and I think that's especially impressive considering that our requirements are more rigorous. If we look at the next slide, we want to understand the big picture. We also want to understand how our different student populations performing. On the left-hand side, you can see the 4-year cohort graduation rate. So that is the percent of students who started in 9th grade who graduated 4 years later. And then on the right, you can see the 5th or the 5-year cohort completion rate. So that's percent of students who also graduated after the additional year. We were excited to be outperforming the state. We're definitely concerned that not all of our students are performing as well as they could. We're seeing some modest gains over the last 3 years, with the exception of our Latino students who we're not seeing those gains. Let's skip the next slide and then just look at the high school success plan. So
Can we,
Sure.
sorry, can we go back 2 slides just real quick? Thanks. The other piece I just want to say, I know we mentioned the multiple pathways to graduation, right? The other thing that we pay attention to is 5-year completer rates. So there are students that enter our high school system, and it may take, for a variety of reasons, slightly longer, but our commitment is to get students to complete. This is often the work of our multiple pathway schools, which include not only our district alternatives, but our contracted alternatives that we have with community-based organizations. So we attend to both, and it kind of looks at a complete picture of the system and in that realm on both of those. So
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. So the 5th year side is certainly fewer students, right?
yes.
Okay.
So it would be, there are some students that continue, so some students may choose if they do not complete based on their entry year of high school. They may return to their high school and finish as a 5th year student. They may go to one of our district alternative school at Alliance, for example, and they may only have part of a year to finish, but they finished in that 5th year, so they count in that next year's
in that.
moment, or they may be at one of our community-based alternatives, schools like Mount Scott, Rosemary Anderson, PYC North, or through through some of our programs with PCC, for example. So it gives a sort of a holistic view of an entire class that comes in at a given year, sort of what their paths are to completion and getting to a diploma and or to a GED.
It's really quick, hopefully quick. So we just don't have the 2022-23 data yet.
Correct.
Just because
It typically comes out in, let's say, December or January.
January.
And we all eagerly await
Yeah.
And that's,
our data.
Any,
So
any
the validation for graduation takes a while, right, and to compile the data, and so we work with ODE to do that, and it's usually a mid-year, so it lags by about 6 months from.
and we have that scheduled
Yeah.
for the full board.
Yeah. Every year we.
yeah, just remember that.
And sometimes in that 5th grade cohort, you have your second language learners, your newcomers, for example, who need a little bit more time, especially around language acquisition, and your special needs students who need a little bit more time as well.
I'm not sure if this level of details of interest, but if a student enrolls, let's say at Ida B. Wells High School as a freshman, and they remain enrolled, if they graduate, they're part of our completion date. If they stop coming to school, they're considered part of our cohort as well. If the student transfers to Lincoln High School their sophomore year, they become part of Lincoln High School's cohort, right? If they transfer to, if they move out of state and we lose track of them for some reason, they're still considered Ida B. Wells student. If Ida B. Wells gets a senior from another school district who's credit deficient, as a senior, they become part of our cohort graduation rate. And so, as Margaret mentioned, the validation process, the state essentially needs to go through a process of accounting for all the students before they can finally say what the high school graduation rates. So it's certainly not number of kids who started there as seniors and finished as seniors. It's much more intricate than that.
So there's one more graduation that's gonna happen for the class of 2023 as well, and we hope that you guys have it on your calendar. So there are students that finish over the summer,
Right.
and we'll hold a graduation for them in the upcoming weeks. And so we hope that you guys will be able to join us for that. September 7th, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, you read my mind. That's what I was going to say too.
Oh.
Yeah.
Channeling.
All right.
So very briefly, PPS High Schools, the principals and district leaders came together to create a plan for what are the things that all of our high schools are working towards in order to ensure college and career readiness. And so there are 3 kind of main buckets of work. One is around improving instruction and aligning assessment. This very much aligns with our district instructional priorities. We're also engaging students through relationships and then focusing on preparing students for post-secondary success. So there are some specific actions under each of those. And then on the next slide, you can see some of the goals that we have for as far as outcomes are concerned with regards to post-secondary readiness, graduation, and student engagement. So this is a summary document, if you will.
Did you go over 2 slides prior? I think, did we touch on the previous? Yeah, there.
Sure. So we in the board goals, the formal board goals are focused on graduation, but we also report on college readiness, which is measured in a variety of ways. So it is 3 advanced coursework, 3 courses, so it could be 3 classes of either advanced placement or an international baccalaureate course or dual credit. Completion of the CTE pathway, the seal of biliteracy. There's a number of ways into that. So there, we also track and share with the board's progress towards what we see as post-secondary readiness. The goal, you can see the goal overall, the board goal was set, and for some of our we're approaching it for all of our students, and there are areas that we need some specific focus. But the post-secondary readiness is that we look at both graduation and post-secondary readiness, and post-secondary readiness just has additional requirements. Really looking at advanced coursework, which when you look at the high school success plan, there's a whole piece around, are we doing CTE, hands-on work? Are we looking at preparing students to make a transition to either work, technical, or directly to college? And this gets presented at about the same time to the overall board as when we do graduation rates. So similar dated timing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Looking at just thinking about our graduation requirements, and I love that we're acknowledging that our requirements are more rigorous than that of the state, and I'm grateful that that we're exceeding that number. My question comes to I guess it's twofold. One, are our requirements, our graduation requirements, are they a baseline for any college for within Oregon, so that if our students meet the graduation requirements for our high schools, then they automatically meet the requirements for all of our schools, our colleges within Oregon? And then the second part that I would ask, well, I guess I'll pause on that one, because I feel like if that's the case, then I'm struggling, because just this past year, some of the students that graduated, and I had a dad tell me, and I wanted to bring him back in so that I could have him speak to somebody else so that we could hear it. Somebody else outside of me could hear it directly. But I had a dad tell me that although he was glad that his son was walking across the stage, he was sad that his son was walking across the stage and wasn't reading at a high school level, but yet he graduated. And I don't even understand how that's possible, because in my mind, we failed that student if we let them walk across the stage and they're not reading at the right level.
So, Director Green, our graduation requirements are aligned with what's called the Oregon University System requirements. So we follow what are the entrance requirements for the public colleges and universities in Oregon, and we make sure that our graduation requirements align with those. So that's the easy answer. The harder question is the one that is your second question. Which is, how do we make sure that all of our students are graduating college and career ready? Do they have the critical thinking skills, the reading skills, the writing skills, the soft skills and the hard skills to be successful? And that there's no easy answer to that other than to say that there's an ongoing effort.
Mm-hmm. And so with unlike other states or other districts that have other requirements for graduation in addition to pure credits. For example, there are some spaces where you have to have a minimum 2.0 GPA. Your attendance has to be at 85% or a certain percentage or higher. You can't pass any particular class if you have more than 10 days of absence. So unfortunately, students, and please help me if I'm wrong, students in Oregon can graduate on credits with a 1.0 or a lower GPA, with a 1.0 GPA, which we know is not satisfactory to get into any college or university, anywhere really in the country. So then the question becomes, what do we have within our realm of control to provide? We're providing the rigor, we're providing the curriculum, but how do we provide a standard so that we are encouraging more students to perform at higher levels than the bare minimum. Other systems, for example, and I'm just naming, have because of the 2.0 requirement, have a grade like a grade replacement policy where teachers understand that if you give a child a D, you hurt them. And if a student receives an F in a class, they're required to take the class over. And if they take the class over and get a B, then that F is no longer in the calculation of your GPA. And so different systems have different requirements. Unfortunately, we don't have that here in Oregon. And so it's set up such that students, it's possible for them to graduate high school with a low GPA.
And I think, part of the focus of, that our instructional priorities, which, is really providing the through line from, general policy right into the classroom around what does it mean to have grade level standardized instruction? What does that mean to have students engaged in rigorous content and across all content areas, and how are we really staying focused on that as part of the work we're doing? And I think that the question of how are we really looking at the skills and the readiness for students, I think is a robust conversation. It's nuanced and also we can talk about what are some of the indicators beyond what we see and how we're gathering that information. But
is that a question too?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. So I had a similar experience at one of our graduations, and I was trying to run back in to have the person talk to Dr. Franco, who was coming out of one of the graduations. So this was a lady, and she, when I knew her from the past, and we were talking, and I was congratulating her about her kid graduating, and she stopped me. She was like, "Well, she can barely read." And I was really trying to get back in so she can talk to you. Because I'm just trying to figure out, to understand how that happens. You're talking about over 12 years of failure. 12 years of somewhere where it didn't get checked, assessed, corrected at some point. And so I had that same experience nearly this year. The other question I had was, well, when I hear, well, we can graduate, I understand our graduation doesn't mean proficiency. I get that. But I don't understand how we are using the rigors for college. I think you said the college
university system.
Yeah. But if we can graduate people at a 1.0, how it seems like that's.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like that makes sense that we're doing this at this college level, but then we can graduate at 1.0. How do that, they can't get into college, so how are we doing a college system when we graduate people?
The other thing before I allow you to respond, I just wanted to throw in too, because what is brought to my memory also about the state of Oregon is that while we do have the state assessment at the 10th grade level, at the high school level, which in and of itself is intended and could be very rigorous to unveil some of these deficiencies and proficiency within our students, unlike other districts, states, such, it's not a part of the high school plan. So, and we have a opt-out process where many students don't have to take the state assessment. That would really answer the question for each and every student regarding how are they translating their learning and how are they able to demonstrate proficiency in English and mathematics, at minimum science and basic.
We used to have, this was before pandemic, we used to have an essential skills requirement. And so kids could meet the essential skills requirement through a number of things. SBAC or OSAS was one. How they scored on the SAT or the ACT was another. And if they couldn't meet there, then they could put together a work sample portfolio, which was, and so they had to meet one of those pieces in order to graduate. But since the pandemic, ODE has in a sense gone away with that level of expectation. Another way of measuring, say, a student's proficiency, aside from, say, credit and those types of things. I love this conversation because it really, to me, brings up the topic of grading in particular. And you asked Director Wang about what are some topics potentially. I think that's an outstanding topic. One of the things too you think about too is, and I think Dr. Proctor mentioned it. I've seen scales where it's an A, B, C. There's no D's. Nobody gives D's. And like I said, if a student is not proficient, then what are those opportunities then to get them up to that level, right, across the board? But that's that's a big conversation, which I would really love to have.
Yeah, I think that's here to see if we can make add back some of those proficiency requirements they talked about, and then look at that, and then go ahead.
Well, I'll just add in this conversation, it's about 1 out of every 5 students in Portland Public Schools is a student that experiences disability. So every piece of data that we've shown you thus far has included, and I'm not saying that the students or the families that you talk to, those students experience that. I mean, I don't have any idea. That I just think as part of our conversation through this year, it would be helpful for us to learn a little bit more about special education, the work that we do for special education, and how we serve and support students that experience disability in Portland. Not that there are less rigorous standards, not that all the things that we've talked about aren't also present for those students. And some students experience disability, which means that they may engage in rigorous curriculum with accommodation, move through our system, and their reading still may be impacted when they graduate, but that doesn't mean they're not college and career ready. So there just is, as we're having an opportunity to have a conversation about these things, I think it's a huge part of our district that I would like to bring for your attention.
Yeah,
Glad they brought that up.
Yeah, special education is super important, especially as, Jay is really doing the transformative work for our district and to try to address some inequities in that space as well. So that definitely is a topic that we can probably tackle for a while.
And their English language learners
There
as
was
well.
And I do apologize, but as I mentioned.
Oh yeah, no worries. Yeah, good luck.
I'm looking forward to future conversations.
Yeah, thank you.
And then
I also want to go ahead.
Well, we also have to realize if someone doesn't have a high school diploma, then they're stuck. They can't go on. And so I don't think we expect everybody to be college ready.
Correct.
Even though we kind of say that, but I don't think we expect that.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, I have a grandchild who plenty capable, but just plain lazy. So, did manage to graduate with the help of a lot of teachers. And now she's going on. Now that she's older, she's going to do more. But yeah, I don't think we can really expect people to be college level.
Yeah, I think you brought up a huge issue as well. I mean, if we increase the graduation standards, are we also eliminating certain other pathways?
Right.
Right. So I mean, this is a heavy topic. I also want to address kind of Director Green and also Director Hollins. You mentioned, someone who has taught high school. I would say, those kids you're talking about, they're probably really smart, because one of the things that I want to mention too is that a lot of the reading issues come not in high school. It actually starts really early, like talking about elementary, middle school. Because one of the things that we see in high school a lot is that kids who have struggled reading, especially in elementary school, have developed strategies to get by without having to be able to read. So that, I mean, they're smart in that way, and then they figure out how to get by. And so they can still get through high school without figuring out how to, without actually learning how to read. They just, they fake it, whatever, but they figure out how to get through. And I think that gets the bigger issue that you mentioned earlier about how we're talking about grading assessment, how effectual that is in terms of catching. And I think that raises another question in terms of like, do we want to talk about also what kind of systems do we have in place that we can catch these kids that are not reading appropriately, and what kind of remedial systems that we can, I mean, I know that we do have some, but like in terms of how we increase their effectiveness or even catch more students, something where, like we're talking about SPED and disabilities, that's a huge one. Identifying, for example, dyslexia even earlier than we, I think we are, from what I remember, we're making some good progress on that. Things like that. And so, I mean, that goes beyond, I think, high school graduation, which is what I want to point out, catching them early.
Yeah. And the other factors that could be discussed with high school graduation requirements as well is proficiency. We sometimes think of proficiency as reading, math, and in the academics. But proficiency is also demonstrated when a student who's going through a CTE career pathway is able to not only take and pass the NOCTI exam, but also take and pass that industry credential. And how do we set up our students to have options, to graduate with a high school diploma where they could go to college if they choose, while at the same time graduating with an industry credential. That is something that I work, most of my schools that I supervised in Philly were CTE schools as well. And what does it look like if the child graduates with a triple whammy of also having some dual enrollment under their belt? So, when I think about the portrait of a graduate, it really is how do we set up our students so that they could graduate with as many options as possible that they may choose. Yeah. So there's a way of weaving in proficiency through a career as well, like you're saying.
And just to back up what you said too, we set up in San Diego some of our high schools so the kids can actually graduate with a minimum entry qualification for any job. Like they could go into fire service, they could go into biomedical, they could go into nursing, but it was woven into their daily practice in the classroom. So we had people from the industry who actually taught those classes at CTE and gave them the certification. So yes, you're correct. Some of them ended up with multiple options, and some of them were able to go into industry right away.
Very nice. I feel like I could talk about this. Oh, well, let's talk about this all year.
Enjoy
Great.
Yes.
For the sake of time, unless anyone has any further things they want to talk about, I feel like this is a conversation I would love to have throughout this year. Also, if anybody has ideas for what they want to tackle and discuss, feel free to email, contact, call, whatever.
We're in the process of exploring what implementing equitable grading practices would look like at the middle school and high school. And so if you're interested in having us report on what those plans look like, we have to come back.
I want to say yes because that's where like my wheelhouse of interest is, but I don't want to speak for everyone else on the board.
Very interesting.
I'm interested in that as well, Director.
Great.
So thanks to go. Before we go, I do have one question I'd like to volley to you so that I can get direction as to how I could what I should expect moving forward as it pertains to the adding ROTC and JROTC to the multiple pathways for graduation. Who who would be the best person within our district to look and see the viability of that? And is that something that that like I'm looking at, and I'm online, so I'm looking at Dr. Proctor, who does curriculum, and I know that she has experienced this in other states and school districts that she's worked with. So would that be something that, what would be the best path? Because I don't want to leave here with an expectation that someone is looking into this and going to bring me something back, and they're not. So if I could get a level of clarity around that, it would be greatly appreciated.
Director Green, I'd be happy to work with my team at multiple pathways, high school, even in some middle school redesign elements to bring together a team so that we could bring some information together to see what has been done in the past, what can be done, what's possible. You know, it will be a lift because here in Portland, and I think Oregon as a state, it's not something that is maybe done, and that's part of my investigation as well. And I could also investigate in what it looks like with the team. And I see Philippe is taking notes, and I know he's very interested in it as well. So we'll put together a team, and we will be able to share what we have discovered, what's possible, how we could start planning forward if it's something that we have to engage community, teachers, and such, and the board, and all stakeholders into this discussion. But it is definitely something we could look into and bring back some information.
And I can definitely tell you that Oregon's, it may be Portland, but it's not Oregon as a whole, because Oregon City has a very robust ROTC and JROTC program that's functioning within several of their high schools, at least 3 that I was able to research.
Great. And I came from a district many years ago where it felt like every high school had a ROTC, JROTC program, and yeah, so it is definitely something that is worth. It builds leadership in students. It gives them opportunities and options. A sense of discipline and again, leadership it could be formulated through these areas as well.
It'll also help to line up careers as well.
Oh yes.
So there's a lot of career building within those programs, and again, I'm looking at not that this would be something that has to benefit every single student. I just know that there are some students that this could be a benefit for, the same way mechanical engineering is going to benefit some students, and nursing is going to benefit some students, and the trade work, when you start thinking about sheet metal workers, and you start thinking about the framers, the plumbers, the electricians, all those benefit some students. I'm trying to give as many of our students as possible a pathway to a career or an opportunity or something that would elevate them to a space where they feel that there's hope and that they believe in themselves and what they're capable of doing and becoming.
That's right. There's a misconception that just because a student goes through a JROTC program, that means they're automatically going into the military. And many of my students have gone to college and went on to have fine careers outside of the military. But those who wanted that option, it was an option for them as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone sign up for public comment?
Yeah.
I guess if anyone has any further questions or comments, I think we can move to adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.